It's Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Brian Batko on today. Aaron Rodgers has finally signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. What does this mean for the offense with Arthur Smith? What does it mean for the sway that Rodgers might have in the organization after we've seen what happened in Green Bay and New York? And does it actually make the Steelers better competitors in the AFC North, let alone the entire AFC? All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive Podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Brian Batko. We're your Steelers writers, and as always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive Podcast, as well as daily episodes or daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, like Chipped Ham and Football with Brian Batko on Tuesdays. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Did you know they also help with workers' compensation? Call them today, 1-800-94-EDGAR to get them to fight for your workers' compensation rights. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, we were at OTAs all day, all 2 weeks long. I'm sure the Steelers, who we were asking questions of every day, hey, what do you feel about this Aaron Rodgers situation? Hey, do you know it? And all of them are just like, we don't know. We can't say anything. I am so glad that they're like, great, let him answer those questions. Let's get this out of the way. I do feel like there is, at least from a reporter sense, I feel that way, just about like we can finally stop talking about the if and the when.
Yeah, I've got my Hawaiian shirt on because it's time to relax, as one famous veteran quarterback once said when he was with the Cheeseheads up in Green Bay. Yeah, I mean, it was still, I think, somewhat of a distraction these last couple weeks for the team, but, you know, it's done now. Now there will be other talking points to discuss. I'm sure that every player will still be getting questions about what's he been like? How is it? Is he catching up? How are things going? So it's unavoidable either way. You know, I think if he would have been here, you could have kind of squashed this whole news cycle early. But I think the timing of this, agreeing to the deal on Thursday, June 5th, right after the team wraps up OTAs, optional OTAs, kind of makes me think, yeah, that 6-hour visit to Pittsburgh back whenever that was, they pretty much hammered everything out. Now, obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what was said. Was it Rodgers saying, hey, guys, I feel really good about this. I feel really good about the situation. You guys should feel confident. I'm just going to need a little bit more time. And the Steelers are like, okay, take your time. It's all good, but we would like you here by mandatory minicamp. Or if that was expressed at some point while the lines of communication were open, maybe it was as simple as that. And, I think signing now, it does make it pretty obvious to me that, yeah, he did not want to be in Pittsburgh for the voluntary team activities. Who doesn't want an extra 2 weeks of vacation if you can get it? But, of course, it's just more about, is that a good thing in the long run for the team? Is it a nothing burger? I don't know. Those questions will continue to linger, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that clearly I do think there was an agreement of some sort, and it might have been still like a handshaking agreement where like you still have to wonder if the other side's going to honor it, because my word is my bond. If you watch Jerry Maguire, that ain't going to cut it in the NFL. But
to speak of Jerry Maguire, if JJ McCarthy would have woken up one morning and said, I don't like football anymore, and written a manifesto to the Vikings retiring, boom, the calculus probably changes for someone who has not signed any papers yet with the Steelers.
Exactly. And so there was always that possibility, but clearly they got their guy to get in. Now, let's talk about how he fits in with the Steelers. And that's, of course, in Arthur Smith's offense. Arthur Smith, we've only seen 1 year of him in Pittsburgh, but we do have the sense of what he likes to do. He likes to run the ball. He likes to use motion. He likes to, have his quarterbacks work from under center. Those are all things. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, I don't think he's running the football, but he's more of a shotgun guy, and he doesn't like putting guys in motion as much, just as far as following his trends since he's been in Green Bay. And so there's going to be a clashing of styles between these two guys that I think is going to be very interesting to watch. And it's going to be up to Arthur Smith to adapt the Steelers offense to what Aaron likes to do, or for Aaron Rodgers to be like, you know what? I'm the 41-year-old guy. I've been brought here for a short time. I'm going to conform to what they want. And I have a hard time seeing the 4-time MVP quarterback that's probably a first ballot Hall of Famer kind of bending to the will of Arthur Smith, entirely or even mostly. But I do feel like there has to be some sort of compromise, because the whole point of what the Steelers have been building is to have a physical offense that wins in the trenches and capitalizing on that with the run game.
Yeah, I think as far as that goes, I mean, it makes sense. Most quarterbacks, when they get to that age and they have a certain experience level, they do want to sit back there and have a full picture of the defense, because that's pretty much their biggest strength at that stage. I mean, they can't move around as well as they used to. They don't have that first step that they used to. So you want to minimize the amount of maneuvering you have to do in the pocket. And you feel like, all right, I've seen every coverage a million times. You're not really going to fool me with pre-snap rotations and blitz disguises. So let me just sit back here and shotgun and be surgical and pick you apart. I mean, Ben liked to do that late in his career for sure. So that's not unique to Aaron Rodgers, but it is a wrinkle that's going to have to get ironed out between what the Steelers were probably thinking they'd be doing under Arthur Smith when they hired him a little more than a year ago. And now, of course, how the equation changes with Rodgers here. I happen to think that they did probably talk through all of that when he came to the South Side in his rented Chevy Malibu and, flying in through somewhere other than Pittsburgh International Airport back on March 21st. So, I also tend to think that as far as the schematic fit with Arthur Smith, Arthur and Rodgers have some mutual friends in the league, Matt LaFleur probably being the biggest one, considering Arthur Smith coached under him in Tennessee. LaFleur obviously coached Rodgers with the Packers, and they seem to have a good rapport. So there's probably some common ground there and some mutual respect too. And I think if I could try to get into Arthur's head a little bit here, you're in your second year as the offensive coordinator. The first year didn't go particularly well, but people understand that there was a lot of just uncertainty at the quarterback spot. You're going from Wilson to Fields back to Wilson, and in the end, neither one worked out. Now I think you're almost like, okay, this is pretty much a 1-year rental of a guy, and we're taking a big swing to see what happens. It's not necessarily going to reflect poorly on me if the Rodgers experiment goes badly. This is a Mike Tomlin deal again.
Right.
Everybody's kind of agreeing with that. So then maybe year 3, if they do draft a player in the first round, that would be put up or shut up time for Arthur Smith. So I think he will give Rodgers way more leeway. He'll have a lot more trust and confidence in him to make changes at the line, to trust what he's seeing, than he did with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields.
I think that's the thing, is that it's going to be the trust. It's going to be the adherence, the respect there. That's going to play a big factor in all of this. And because, it was obvious even before Russell Wilson got started, you and I talked about on this show about how whenever we brought up Russell Wilson, Arthur Smith would kind of be dismissive about giving him any sort of credence to anything. And I don't think that's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. I think that that's something that, if Arthur Smith has a problem with Aaron Rodgers and a knowable one, the Steelers would have found other accommodations or tried to find other accommodations. We know it was a slim quarterback market anyways. But I think that that's going to be a big key here, is how do those two guys function? And I think the other thing here is, and this will play into our next segment, a bit of a segue, how much does Aaron Rodgers make them deviate from what they're trying to build? Because Andy Weidel, Omar Khan, since they took over a couple of years ago, they have been ushering in the crew that's going to take over the trenches. It's going to be more physical. It's going to be that kind of a team. Does Aaron Rodgers detract from that, from things that he wants in just the 1 year that he's going to be part of this? We'll talk about that in the next segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Do they also do workers' compensation? When you've been hurt on the job, you need to know who decides when you're better, who decides when your treatment's over, and who decides when your benefits are over. The answer might surprise you. It's someone that's not on your side, because it's the insurance company's doctors. They won't have your backs. But it's not good. And the people who will have your backs, Edgar Snyder and Associates. You can call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR because they will fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers in the sense of the control he might have with this organization. Now, many people, including myself, wondered what would Aaron Rodgers be like with the Steelers because it was very visible the control that he had in New York when he wanted Allen Lazard, they got Allen Lazard. When they wanted Nathaniel Hackett, whatever he wanted, he got. And
Devontae Adams won't be getting him though. He's off to the Rams, and
right,
that's probably a good move for him career wise.
Exactly. He's in an offense with a quarterback that's not. I mean, I guess Stafford's actually pretty old too, but not as old. But point being, he got his way of things, and then eventually you saw those clips of like on the sideline when he was looking at Robert Saleh kind of funny, and then all of a sudden Robert Saleh's getting escorted out of the building without even being able to say goodbye to his team, and so it gave the appearance that he very much had a hand in that. I cannot imagine the Steelers giving Aaron Rodgers nearly that much juice, let alone the coach's part of it. But to say like, hey, we're going to trade for this really, really, really big player that's only going to work for a very short time for us, unless it's like a player that they're like, hey, like, if Terry McLaurin suddenly became available, it's like, well, Terry McLaurin's going to help everybody for the next four years. So like, not that that's actually going to happen, but like, I have a hard time seeing them make moves just to appease Rodgers for this season that dig into the foundation that they're building, both on the roster and in their draft capital to trade up for a quarterback next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be like, hey, Aaron, tell us what 6 receivers and 3 tight ends you want us to keep this year on the roster or anything like that. Or like, hey, is there a guy you want us to bring in as a special senior offensive assistant? Like, I don't think those things are going to happen. But could I see him lobbying for a trade for Allen Lazard from the Jets? I wouldn't put that past him at all. I mean, especially because the Steelers are still in the market for a number 2 receiver. They had Gabe Davis at the facility yesterday. They signed Robert Woods right after the draft. They traded George Pickens. So like there is a potential void there. And from a Rodgers perspective, he could be like, hey, I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball because I'm only signing now, at which point I would definitely send the Tim Robinson hot dog meme of like, we're all looking for the guy who did this. But like
never
for his point, be like, hey, I need a guy here who he'll hit the ground running with me with my hand signals and all the nonverbal communication and stuff. So like, I wouldn't be shocked by that, but I mean, they would have to know they're going to take the optics hit of, well, Aaron Rodgers is playing puppet master again now with another team. But yeah, to your overall point, Chris, like he's not going to get Mike Tomlin fired. I mean, this isn't going to devolve into it could devolve into dysfunction, but it's not going to be the type that is enough of a dumpster fire that the Jets had to blow up their whole organization. So, I mean, I think in some ways that's a point in the pro column for the Steelers getting into the Rodgers business is you are a franchise that's sort of insulated from the distraction component of it. But I mean, it remains to be seen if they do make any moves that are affected by having this particular quarterback, even though I will say he and Mason Rudolph, fairly similar styles of player at this point. It's not like you're building one potential offense for Justin Fields and one potential offense for Russell Wilson.
I agree with that. I mean, Aaron Rodgers back in his prime, kind of like Russell Wilson. I mean, not exactly like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was kind of crazy, but Aaron Rodgers, I mean, he was a guy that in his prime, he could get out. He could run on you. He could make guys miss. He could do a lot of things with his legs, and he could still do a little bit of that, but it's just a very, very, very limited.
More than Kirk Cousins, more than late stage Ben.
Yes, very, very much so. And so, but to your point, his strength is going to be coming from the pocket as a passer. He still has a good arm by indication. I mean, some of the throws that he made last year were still at a high level. And I think the big thing he brings to the table is his ability. He's seen every defense in the NFL, not literally just every team, but every concept that teams use, a cover 6 from a cover 4 to cover 1 to zero blitz. He's seen and reacted to all of them at different points. So he knows how to conduct things. And so I just think it's going to be interesting to see with that, I think the limited scope of what he will be able to control might be the thing that Russell Wilson really wanted Arthur Smith to trust him with, and that was to adjust plays at the line of scrimmage. I think that he will get that. But I also think that beyond that, if Alan Lazard is available for a very cheap something, maybe that's the extent okay, we'll give up a 7th round pick and we'll pay him a very little bit amount of money to when he gets here or something like that. Or Romeo Doubs, because he's on the last year of his deal and he played a year with Aaron Rodgers. Maybe one of those. But I have a hard time seeing them and going and getting a Devontae Adams-like player who is obviously in for just a 1 to 2 year stint just because of Aaron Rodgers and it have any bearing on their future plans. And I also don't see them giving up draft picks that are going to actually help them get to where they want to be next year, which is, of course, drafting that franchise quarterback and compromising this play. To me, that's the biggest thing that's in the Steelers' favor. Like you said, it's that they know he's here for a 1-year deal. He knows he's in Pittsburgh for a 1-year deal. And I don't think the Steelers have any illusions that they are they'll say, oh, we're here to compete for a Super Bowl, but they have no, the Jets thought when they were getting Aaron Rodgers, they had a 3-year window to win a Super Bowl. I don't think the Steelers see it that way. I think they see this as get us to 2026 without, falling off a cliff. Maybe we win a playoff game. If we do, great. But the point is to open up the window in the next year or two.
Yeah, and I also think organizationally, I mean, it's not a very siloed off organization. Traditionally, it's always been a united front with the team president, the GM, the head coach. But I think maybe now more than ever, you've kind of got Omar Khan back here prepping the ingredients for 2026 and beyond. And he's like, hey, Mike, you've got Aaron Rodgers up there and you're trying to prepare the best souffle you can right now for 2025. I'm worried about meal prepping for the rest of the week back here. So you can't have some of the stuff that I'm using right now for the stew that you're trying to put together at this moment. And as far as the Arthur Smith stuff, to be fair to him, these questions and we'll say controversies about quarterbacks not having the latitude to change plays at the line and have that sort of freedom, this predates Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson. I mean, this was also coming up with Matt Canada and Ben Roethlisberger, and Kenny Pickett for that matter. So I think to some extent you start to ask how much of this is Mike Tomlin's overall philosophy or influence as well. And that's another guy who I think, if that is indeed the case and has been the case for years now, I think he too will bend a little bit to make this work with Rodgers, especially because if you go back to the last 2 or 3 times the Steelers have faced him, so much credit given to him by Mike Tomlin about how he can use tempo to his advantage. And he's using the crowd noise for the defense to his advantage. And he is, in complete and total control up there at the line of scrimmage. So if you're not looking to utilize that kind of stuff with Aaron Rodgers at age 41 and post Achilles tear, then there's no good reason to even be in the Rodgers business.
I think that's the thing is you're bringing him in for those factors, for him to use his savvy to win you games and to win you moments. And again, the ultimate objective for 2025 is to develop the offensive line, to get the run defense better, to make sure that the foundation is better prepared to take on a rookie quarterback in the coming year or two, where they can try to bring that guy in and then actually open up their window to being a Super Bowl contender. And that's part of it. But let's talk about this year. We'll do that in the next segment here, because Aaron Rodgers, now that he's with the Steelers, what does that do for their competition? What does that do for the AFC North? The Steelers have been right in the thick of the AFC North, but they have not been able to win it since 2020. So we'll dive into that here next on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, Want to remind you, this show is also brought to you by UFC Gym Pittsburgh. If you're looking for a way to challenge your body and sharpen your mind, look no further than UFC Gym Pittsburgh. You can step into something more than just a workout. Welcome to the brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy at UFC Gym. Here, it's not just about training, it's about living the values of honor, discipline, and respect. Whether you're a total beginner or leveling up your skills, you'll be guided through a structured program led by a third-degree black belt instructor who builds confidence, strength, flexibility, and real technique. Head down to UFC Gym at the Waterfront or in Market Square to learn about the exclusive 3-month introductory package today. That's at UFC Gym Pittsburgh. Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Brian Batko. Brian, the Steelers finished second place in the AFC North last year, making the playoffs behind the Baltimore Ravens, just above the Cincinnati Bengals. With Aaron Rodgers, are they more likely to stay in the same place, win the division, or fall back a step?
Stay in the same place, I think. And that's
we're on the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of been my reason for not being pro Rodgers all along, especially because he is such a larger than life figure at this point in his NFL career. That is the juice worth the squeeze on doing this when he is diminished from what he once was? And it's kind of like, yeah, I understand as well as anybody. If you watched last week's Chipped Ham and Football with Moats, we went through all the potential scenarios that could have played out at quarterback differently for the Steelers. And it's all led to this very bleak offseason where it was basically, hey, do you want to pay above market value more than you're comfortable with for Justin Fields? Do you really want to run it back with Russell Wilson when there was so much friction? I feel like it's almost Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin playing ping pong. He's like, Arthur Smith's like, all right, Justin Fields is doing well through 6 games, and Mike volleys back, well, we got to put in Russ. And Arthur Smith's like, okay, by the end of the season, it's like, but we got to be done with Russ now. Mike volleys back, all right, but now we're going Aaron Rodgers. And Arthur Smith's like, can we look into Jonnu Smith at least, bro? So I think ultimately he's an upgrade over everybody else who was realistically out there. Although I do sort of wonder, a Geno Smith trade, could they make that happen? But that's a big time hypothetical that he might not have been interested in coming here, the Pete Carroll connection, all of that. But there wasn't a lot they could have done differently. I know there's a groundswell of roll with Mason people out there. And
there are.
And because it's like, hey, if his ceiling's 10-7 and Rodgers is 11-6, is it worth the potential headache of Rodgers being weird and unlikable for a season if that does happen? I don't know. For me, I don't think it's worth it. I think he's still a decent quarterback, but is decent worth that? I'm kind of out on it, Chris. And, the Steelers clearly think it is. That I guess if everything aligns correctly, this could be a good move for them.
Brian, I'm with you in the sense that once the field was set the way it was, Aaron Rodgers over Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, and Carson Wentz and those guys. I have a hard time thinking with the things that Aaron Rodgers brings to the table. And like, this is just Aaron Rodgers, like the Pat McAfee show, they're appearing on Joe Rogan and all the attention that comes with it. Unless you are just 1,000% sure that the organization and Mike Tomlin can just make that not a factor the way it had been for the Jets and the Packers. I just thought it made more sense to, if nothing else worked, bring back Russell Wilson, who appeared to still be in the fold, like ready to sign a contract, even after Justin Fields got signed. Like it seemed like he was waiting for the Steelers. And then when they were just like, we really don't want you, go. And he was like, all right, I'll go.
He would have been at OTAs in full pads and eye black
exactly.
on. Like, let's go, baby.
He would have been in full pads. Oh man, he would be.
But I just think there was no putting that. What was the old Tomlinism from a while back? There was no putting that Jello back in the box with Russ.
The toothpaste back in the
staff. Yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely that is the case. But like, I felt like, look, I wanted to Arthur, pull up your big boy pants, let the work it out with Russ, be professionals. We got one more year of this before we make a big swing at something. And I'm with you in that sense that I'm not so sure that Aaron Rodgers rose the ceiling high enough to justify this. But hey, in their mind, it does. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out this year. I think that the Steelers' chances to compete better in the division and better in the AFC are less about Aaron Rodgers and more about the development of the groups that they've been trying to turn into their new nucleus, like their offensive line. They need Broderick Jones to work at left tackle. They need Troy Fautanu to get off to a good start at right tackle this year. They need Zach Frazier to take a step forward. They need that group to coalesce and at least be an above average unit. If that offensive line, they don't have to be elite. If they can hover just outside of the top 10 as far as offensive lines, that's huge progress, and that'll yield really good results in the run game, pass protection, and pay dividends in other ways. And at the same time, they need the run defense to be better, whether it's Derek Harmon, whether it's Keanu Benton taking a step up, whether it's the linebackers being that much better this year. That has to improve as well. But if they're able to check those boxes, I think those are the things that could make them better competitors in the AFC North and overall in the AFC. Less about Aaron Rodgers doing that. I think the one thing that Aaron Rodgers might do is he might not make some of the mistakes that Mason Rudolph would make. Like he might not put you down 14-0 right away against the Bills in a playoff game. Granted, he also might, but that's where I think that you could see Aaron Rodgers be like, hey, you know what? No, they're trying to get us to do this. Let's get out of this. I've seen that a million times. We're going to do this over here. I just don't think that that's going to be some great comeuppance for the Steelers. I think it's going to be if without Aaron Rodgers, they were going to win 8 or 9 games this year. I think that now they'll win 9, 10, maybe 11 games this year. I think that's the difference, but they still don't win the division. They probably end up as a wild card team. And the biggest thing will be, can they avoid being the 6th or the 7th seed that has to go on the road to play a Buffalo team in their house, a Chiefs team in their house, or a Ravens team in their house? Can they get the chance to go up against a team like the Texans or whoever wins the AFC South this year in the first round? And then maybe that's their chance at their first playoff win since 2016, 2017.
Yeah, and that would be considered a successful season to me, if you do take that step. And I think, there's so many factors you do have to consider in this. There are, more minor factors of, it doesn't affect the comp pick formula. So that was, good. Russ is potentially getting you an extra pick. Rodgers is coming very cheap. All indications are, maybe even $10 million, which if you look at every quarterback salary in the league, that's an absolute steal for someone of his experience level and resume. However, Russ was even more of a steal last year. And at a certain point, you do get what you pay for. And, I come back to this, Chris, that the catch-22 with everything you just analyzed so eloquently there is, yes, Rodgers is a risk-averse quarterback more than let Russ cook Russell Wilson, who still does check down plenty, more than Justin Fields, who's had a lot of turnover issues through this first 4 years of his career. But being risk-averse like that's sort of what limits your ceiling as a quarterback too. So I think if the Steelers are in this mindset of, okay, we're swinging for the fences here with an all-time great, well then what do you want him to be? Do you want him to be the guy who's got the really historically low touchdown to interception or interception ratio? Or do you want him to be the guy who's winging the thing downfield and, giving DK Metcalf a chance and potentially elevating you above the other teams in your division? I don't know. That's where I question the overall clarity of the vision here from the Steelers. And, here's my last kind of take on it, Chris, is just if you were someone who, you came away from that Jets-Steelers game last year at Acrisure Stadium and thought, well, Aaron Rodgers is washed. That's not really somebody I'd be interested in my team signing a year from now. But now, because the Steelers did it, you're all on board and you're going to do the thing where you're like, and look, if you just want to be a fan and you're like, I don't care, I'm optimistic no matter what, I've got my rose-colored glasses on, black and gold all the way, I'll just convince myself and talk myself into any move that they make, then okay, don't let me rain on your parade. But if you do want to look at it critically at all or analytically at all, I don't want to hear the whole spiel about Mike Tomlin knows more about football than any of us and Aaron Rodgers is better at throwing a football than any of us. That doesn't mean they're above reproach or scrutiny and that they always make the right move. So I guess my bottom line take is just either stand on business and keep the same energy if you were anti-Rodgers before June 4th.
I feel you on that. I think you brought up a good point, too, about protecting the football. 6 times in his career as a starter, Aaron Rodgers has had the lowest interception percentage of qualifying quarterbacks, like starting quarterbacks in the NFL, including a 4-year stretch where he had that lowest rate 4 years in a row from 2018 to 2021. Maybe that's
winning MVPs left and right.
Exactly. And when you protect the football, but you also put it in the end zone, like, 1 year, 48 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. I mean, he's not going to do that in Pittsburgh. But if he can do something along the lines of, 5 to 6 touchdowns and then still gets 28, 26 touchdowns like he has the last 2 seasons that he's played, granted, he had higher interceptions numbers those 2 years, but if he limits the interceptions but keeps up those type of touchdown numbers, those are the things that could help the Steelers be more competitive. But again, if whether or not that leads to whether or not they actually can get better than the Ravens, the Bills, or the Chiefs this year, that's going to be up to the rest of this roster to be better and to see them actually develop those pieces. Because again, that's the foundation that's going to set the stage for when the Steelers want to get their quarterback of the future and what kind of team that player will come into.
What number do you think Rodgers is going to wear, Chris?
Definitely 8.
Definitely, you think?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know Terry.
Waitman. Put some respect on his name. Don't act like there's no 8 on the roster right now.
They will call Corliss. They will say, "Hey, Corliss, how much you want? How much you want for that jersey?" All right, cool. And that'll be a done deal. Even if
when he went to the Jets, Rodgers said Joe Namath was going to let him wear 12, and he was like, "No, that belongs to Broadway Joe." Do you think he'll say that about Terry Bradshaw?
Terry Bradshaw let him
it would be he is smart and savvy enough to be like, I'm gonna take the high road here,
right?
And like pander a little bit and just be like, no, I would never even think to ask for Terry Bradshaw's number.
I also think the Steelers would tell him just to get out of here, go pick another number. But no, I don't think he's taking 12, despite Terry Bradshaw's comments about what bark that Aaron Rodgers can eat.
What if he just goes completely different and goes with like number 3 or something? And he's like, through this offseason, I've kind of shed all of my previous life and weight, and this is a new reawakening and a new spiritual journey that I will start with a completely new number.
Maybe that I could see that happening too. Just being like, you know what, just give me my own number. I'm gonna make this a thing. But it is going to be interesting to see how. And hey, we'll get to know that soon because minicamp's next week, and he will be at minicamp. Presumably, you'll see DK Metcalf there. Maybe you'll see TJ Watt there. We get a lot of action next week.
I'm getting a little more excited for it, Chris, from like a media standpoint. I was, and again, I'm not switching up. I'm not switching up my long-held belief here that I don't think this is a good move overall for the Steelers, and it's not what I would have done. And there is still a part of me that's like, are we going to be wasting time every week worrying about what he said on ESPN about this or that current event or public, conspiracy theory or whatever? There's still that aspect of it to me, but I am still coming around as someone who's a 33-year-old man and grew up watching Aaron Rodgers play, and it's going to be surreal, especially when you figure you're covering Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers in back-to-back seasons. And earlier in my life, I covered Ben Roethlisberger for a living. I mean, it is one of those, like when you take a step back and really think about it, it's a cool thing. If my kids end up loving football someday, it'll be fun to talk about these years, documenting and interviewing and writing about, future Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning quarterbacks.
I think it's going to be certainly interesting to see how this plays out and where everything does shake up. And you're right.
I'm an eternal optimist, Chris. I'm always a glass half full kind of guy.
There you go. That's a good way to think. Sometimes you have to be a glass half full kind of guy. But again, minicamp's next Tuesday. We'll get to see Aaron Rodgers in person. We'll learn what number he picks. We'll also see where everything shakes out and who else does show up to minicamp. But for all of that,
what if he shows up with a bag of like peppermint bark and he's like,
that'd be really funny.
That out as a snack for everybody.
That'd be really funny. I would actually kind of that I might actually get a good laugh out of. Like I might be like, okay, I'm here for a petty joke. That's fine. You know me. Like I love to troll people. I have my 13-9 jokes for my West Virginia friends, and That certainly would be funny. Hey, maybe he steps on the Pit logo for what they did to Cal this year. But anyways, he's Brian Batko. I'm Chris Carter. This has been the North Shore Drive podcast. Remember, this still comes on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And we also have daily content from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're going to be back here Monday. Get ready for mini camp with Ray Fittipaldo right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.